Hello and welcome to this edition of the Halcyon Show. My name's Lon Risley and I'm going to be your host for this episode. Welcome! How are you today? How's your day been? It's been a long weekend for me. I originally booked today off to do the Wrestlemania recap. So that's what we're going to do. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch it live for reasons, but I'm vaguely aware of the results. I've seen a lot of the big happenings and things of that nature, but I also want to talk about a few other things on this episode that I didn't get a chance to talk about recently for two reasons. Number one, I've recorded actually 2 or 3 podcasts recently, and I just haven't gotten around to releasing them because one was a half-complete episode where me and my friend were chit-chatting away, and unfortunately I realised halfway through the recording that it wasn't recording anymore. Never mind. I also would like to talk about a few sporting events that have occurred recently, and I'd also like to go into the gaming aspect because I'd like to talk about gaming for a little bit. So we're going to kick off with that rather than the wrestling. I've been playing Red Dead 2 recently. A game that you've all probably gotten out of your system since, and I appreciate that. I understand that the game isn't... it's kind of past its zeitgeist now, that there are other games and other things that are going to be coming up soon that are going to... Mortal Kombat 11, for instance, I know is going to be a pretty big deal to a lot of people. So I understand that it's not exactly topical. However, I do want to share some of my experiences with it. Number one, the initial reaction... It's tricky to deny the fact that there are a lot of instances where I looked at that game and thought, wow, this is needlessly slow. This is boring and painful at times to try and get through because of how laborious it is. But the reason for that is because I've been trying to crank out a couple of hours every other night before I go to sleep. My work schedule has changed recently to the point where it was actually really relaxed up until a few months back. Then I lost my car, so I had to start commuting by bike, which carries its own benefits, but unfortunately carries its own list of drawbacks as well. Chief among which being that it makes me very, very tired. Coupled with the fact that we are now into our 5th month of winter. For the love of God, this winter season just won't seem to end for whatever reason. It just keeps going on and on and on. It's hard to work in that environment because it's cold. I don't like working in the cold. I prefer to work with a nice clear head and a nice neutral environment. But nevertheless, I try to do some work on Halcyon in the evenings, but then I try to get in a bit of me time before I go to sleep. Red Dead is the thing that I've been trying to do along with playing the SNES Classic, which I'll be touching on later on as well. It was hard though, because there's just such little fun to be had in the early openings of the game, apart from marvelling at what a beautiful world that you're inhabiting. And it is stunning. There's no ifs, ands or buts about that. It's a properly stunning world. Filled, dripping with detail, and anyone playing this game for longer than 5 minutes can notice every little touch. And again, the thing is, I'm still noticing things. There are flies in the air, the way the snow moves, the way the mud moves, the way that you interact with things differently depending on your angle and your position and what else it's interacting with. It's a wonderful game, though. And this is the thing, I was very close to writing it off as one of these games that got lost in the trees of trying to create an overly realistic experience. And I understand that that's a criticism that's been leveled against the game. However, there's something to that, though. A slower pace of gameplay, a more methodical pace of gameplay that harkens back, unsurprisingly, to things like Skyrim, where when you get started, you're overwhelmed by everything you have to do. You're just constantly bombarded with extra things to do and little things that you have to try and remember to do on the basis of not sleep, because again I went the werewolf route with Skyrim, which meant that sleep didn't hold any benefits for me. Whereas this game, you have to remember to sleep, you have to remember to eat, you have to remember to shave and cut your hair and wash it, and it's an all-encompassing experience, and unless you get on board with the fact that it's an all-encompassing experience, it will become laborious over time. And I think the interesting thing with Red Dead, though, is that they've attempted to make a more refined version of Grand Theft Auto, not only in the fact that the graphics have taken a big leap forward, not only that the combat mechanics are deeper than GTA, even though I know Michael had the slowdown mechanic to a certain degree, or at least a variation of what is now the Deadeye mechanic. In this game, it's little things. there's not as much swearing. In fact, I can probably count on my one hand how many times I've heard an F-bomb or an S-bomb or something along those lines in the game so far. It's also... it's difficult to get away with anything. Like, like if you're in the middle of a robbery, chances are someone's going to come along and see you. If you're in the middle of stealing something or murdering someone, as in previous games, you know, it's just one of those things where, like in GTA is a prime example where I think the rule of thumb was that you can get away with killing one person and like that no police will be called, unless like you're in the position, like someone in the police sees you. Once you kill the second person, though, the police are immediately called, and it becomes a chase from there, 1-star, 2-star level immediately. And then with the police, it's an instant 2-star, and then if you run, it goes to 3. In Red Dead, you have the bounty mechanic, which I've learnt to make work for me. There are a lot of people that I've seen come to a similar assessment, which is, so long as you keep at least a couple of counties bounty free, so you pay to, you know, absolve yourself of your crimes, then why not have a county that you just keep the bounty and you just go, well, fuck it, this is where I'm going to do all my crime. I'm going to mug people and rob people and steal things and go gunslinging and all the rest of that good stuff that I wanted from a Red Dead game. I wanted to be the cowboy. I want to go out and be in the marauder type character. Now, it's probably not a good thing to indulge that kind of fantasy, to be perfectly honest, but at the same time, it's the deep nature of Red Dead that just keeps bringing me back, because it's the Skyrim thing again, in the sense that you just keep finding stuff to do, new stuff. Every time I pick up and play this game, it seems like there's a new piece of dialogue. It's like this unimaginably vast piece of content that you just think, I keep waiting to hit that. The only thing that I've come across so far that does repeat itself quite often is Arthur in the camp when he's signing off on a conversation. So he'll make the same sort of inflection, more or less. All right, I'll catch you later then. All right, I should be getting along. Or something along those lines. Which I understand. After having so many conversations with people in the camp, there's only going to be so many lines that he can record. So I understand and sympathise with that. But the fact that there's just such little in terms of repetition in this game, it's amazing. It's a staggering piece of entertainment. It's a really, really impressive piece of kit. And it says something that it took a while to get the hang of and to get the gist of. But now that I have, it's great. And the reason why I wanted to talk about Red Dead initially, at least, is a conversation that I had with a buddy of mine, he knows who he is, about the ease of gameplay debate that seems to be rumbling along in gaming at the moment, where people are making the argument that games should be accessible, quote-unquote, to everyone. The argument being that people who are not... It ventures into the disability debate, but I'm going to keep it purely on the defined nature of the debate, which is there should be an easy mode in every game. There should be a way of every player being able to get the bare minimum experience for their money. If they buy the game, they should be able to play it for an experience. Which is interesting, because it's one of those things that's it's tricky to advocate one side or the other on the basis of it always being there. And if I'm honest, I would lean more towards the fact that I wouldn't have it in every game. It would be in the games that need it, or if the designers want to put it in. And I'll tell you why. With any other medium, so let's take film as an example. There's no obligation for the film to make sense to you. There's no obligation for the film to have a certain enjoyment factor that, as a consumer, that you're placing on the film. You're demanding that this film, whatever it is, makes sense to you. Now, unfortunately, that's not how a lot of films work. This is a classic case in point for me, because I'll watch films and I won't understand anything that's going on. The subtle nuances and the context, and it usually takes me a couple of watches to even grasp the bare minimum, and then takes people to point out shit to me as to what I missed and what I should be looking for next time. The Joker trailer, which we'll be talking about later, is a prime case of that, where you just look at that and you go, there's so much to unpack with that. But before we get too sidetracked, ease of gameplay, though, is one that you would argue, because you understand it. If you buy something, you want to get your money's worth. And if you feel like you got your money's worth, even if it's at the expense of, say, a achievement factor, it's just an enjoyment factor you're after, I can certainly understand why people would want easy modes and things. But at the same time, you have to understand that developers have the right to develop the games they want to develop. And they have the games, no obligation to be completable to you. There are games that I have in my library that I really struggled with. I still struggle with. Probably the best example is... gosh, I forget the name. Crisis 2, there it is. I remember picking up Crisis 2 because I had heard the premise of the game, which is that you get a super suit. It's got all these sorts of powers. There's traversable worlds. It's a first-person shooter, but it's dynamic and, you know, all the rest of it. And I thought, wow, this sounds like a great game. And I tried to get into it. I've tried twice, actually. But I can't seem to really find an enjoyment level with the game. And that's tricky to put to people. In games like Dark Souls, which I also have, and I've not completed because it's so goddamn hard, it's almost world-renowned for being a hard game. So people would be almost disappointed if they got a product and it was easy, or anyone could complete it. Following on from this conversation with this gentleman I had, the idea of gatekeeping keeps coming up, and in our conversation, though, I still don't agree with his assessment on our topic. But in terms of gatekeeping, as far as gaming and the difficulty debate is concerned, you've got the two sides. You've got the people that say it should be in all games to make sure people of any ability level can enjoy it, and then you get the ones on the other side saying no, games should be the way they are, and they should be harder, and they should test people, and blah 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 blah. Games are ultimately for enjoyment. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's what a game is for. It's supposed to satiate some kind of fantasy or power play that you want to enact through the digital media of a game. And it doesn't even need to be digital. Previously, you had board games, and previously you had card games, and things of that nature. It affords you a ability to live vicariously through the game to achieve something you wouldn't otherwise achieve in your normal life. Gaming these days has just developed to a point where literally it's at the imagination of the developer. They can do pretty much whatever they want, which is great. It's excellent. It opens up doors to worlds and scenarios and abilities that people would have never dreamed of 10, 20 years ago, and it's great. Red Dead is a great example of that, where the realization is that they have created effectively the best Wild West simulation there has ever been. Down to the minuscule details of everything that you can possibly think of. But some people don't like that. Some people wish it was easier. Some people wish it was simpler. Some people wish it didn't have as much detail. Some people think the depth of the game is burdensome and hard. I would agree with that, but I wouldn't put it as a negative. So it depends on your point of view. If I were to make a ruling on the whole easiness in game situation, here's how I'd cut the cake. It's down to the developer, because ultimately they're the ones that are making the product. If a developer looks at their fan base and decides, well, to make it more marketable, we want to have an easy mode in this game, and they design it so that it's fun for people who want to put it on that mode, and then harder and harder and harder, but still fun for people that want to play it on harder difficulties, then that's their choice, quite frankly. But they shouldn't be forced to do it. I feel like if a developer wants to make a purposefully tricky game, then they should be entitled to do that. The SNES gives me context on this purely because all of those games are built with game overs and restarts. The idea is that you're never going to clean sweep it. You're never going to pick up that game and complete it in one hit. It's going to kick your ass and beat you until you're frustrated. It forces you to get better at the game. Dark Souls is probably the modern day spiritual successor in only so much as that the game does not hold your hand. The point my friend made is the game will try and show you how it wants to be played, and it's up to you whether or not to go against that grain or not. There are games on the SNES that are exactly the same. If you want to play the game aggressively, and so Mario Kart is a great example. You want to drive aggressively, you want to drive every corner as quickly as you possibly can, and burning things with no strategy, fine. You're probably not going to win, though. The game is going to ask you to think more critically and logically in order to overcome the obstacle. I complain about Street Fighter because I put it on the lowest difficulty and I get my ass kicked in round 2 by Ryu. But that's the point. If I'm not going to be able to get through the second stage by doing what I'm doing, I've got 2 choices. I can't reduce the difficulty anymore, so I can either quit or I can rethink my strategy. I can try and learn some of the combinations. I can try and learn against pressuring versus counter-attacking, keeping the fight on the ground as opposed to jumping and lunging and all the rest of this sort of stuff. Gaming isn't supposed to be easy, I don't think. I think the sense of achievement that comes with gaming is something that's part of the experience. I think especially when one of my most notable achievements in gaming is one of the ones that's probably nothing to anybody else, but I remember completing Gears of War 2 on the hardest difficulty. And I never complete games on the hardest difficulty. I'm just not that skilled a gamer. But I remember completing that game and thinking to myself, God damn, I can't believe we just did that. And it was on co-op before anyone says a damn thing. Yes, I didn't complete it on my own. It was hardcore, but it was co-op, so bleh. But the point is that it was an achievement to me. And it was fun because the achievement was unlocked. And it's a reward for persisting in the face of that adversity. But by the same token, if people these days, and it is these days because it's a sign of the times and people don't... Look, with all due respect, microtransactions wouldn't exist unless people were prepared to pay for them. So people are prepared to pay for them and they're prepared to go through money to avoid hours of grinding. That's fine. Games are purposefully designed that the grinding is not fun anymore. I try to find the grinding in games fun these days, because I think that's when you get the most enjoyment out of games. If you can find the mundane things fun and find ways of making them enjoyable, then you're going to get your money's worth ultimately, even if the game is hard, because you can always grind past the obstacle, always. My best example of this is Fable, because in Fable there's no difficulty settings, at least I don't think there are. But there's a point in the middle of the game that if you train hard enough and grind enough, you can max your character. And you're not even at the halfway point of the story, which makes the rest of it reasonably easy, but there are levels that kind of defy that. But it's just fascinating to me how the debate swerves and it turns and it becomes this politicized thing, as most things do these days. But if we're boiling it down to the original subject, gaming, not accessibility, we're talking about ease of play. Because I would define accessibility as if someone is disabled and cannot physically play the game, but a developer can develop a way that the gamer can, well, isn't that great? Isn't that amazing? Why would you be against that? Including more people to be able to play the game. Let's say someone's an amputee and they can't, double amputee, or they suffer from cerebral palsy or some kind of neurological disease or something along those lines that prohibits them from being able to have full control of their faculties, but they can still play the game? How freaking cool is that? I mean, to bring it back to my personal experiences, when I was in school, I remember looking at pictures of artwork by people that disabled from the neck down. They had to paint using their mouth. And the state of some of these pictures were unbelievable. You'd have to go, how did you do... With your mouth? How did you do this? This is like better than anything I can do when I'm fully abled. So it goes to show that because that was their chosen media, and they would embrace it and they would try and hone it and make it to the point where they could participate, and not only participate but excel, we have this artwork to show for it. And isn't that great? Imagine, for the sake of argument, that there's an immense gamer, an amazingly talented and skillful gamer out there, but just lacks the ability, full use of their hands. Their dexterity isn't great. Let's go bare minimum. They're not really able to use a controller, but their thought patterns and their logical skills and their ability with the game is so good that they're better than anyone else if they were physically able. Wouldn't you want that someone being able to enjoy that game? Wouldn't you want them to be able to collect the accolades of being talented at that game? Of course you would. So this idea that you can't have easy modes in games, it's dependent on the developer. I would always place that. That's where the debate ends for me. It's, well, does the developer want to put the game mode in? If not, then fine. If they do, then great. That's kind of the end of the debate for me. If we're talking about accessibility, it's always yes. If a developer can do anything to make the game more accessible to everybody, fuck it, why not? So, I'm glad we put that debate to bed. You can all thank me later. So that's gaming out of the way. I am still trying to make my way through some of the SNES games. The chances are those will make their way into reviews. Going forward, I'll review them individually rather than the console as a whole, because I think it's easy to see that the console is great value for money and you should all go buy it. The Sega 16-bit is going to be dropping, I want to say very soon, but I can't remember the date. So someone will fact check me on that, I'm sure. But the game that's taking up my time at the moment is Red Dead, so don't expect a review on that for some time, because not only am I going to have to complete the goddamn thing, I'm going to have to write it up. And yeah, for those of you who have listened to my channel for a while, you know that my reviews go on for a long time. So to try and keep Red Dead Redemption under an hour is going to be tricky, but I'm going to try and do it. I think the longest review I've ever done so far was a 45-minute review. That was pretty long. We'll try and keep it around that level if I can. So I'm glad we got gaming out of the way. So let's turn to Wrestlemania, because let's just talk about it. So the big results. Brock Lesnar drops the Universal title to Seth Rollins within 4 minutes, I think. 4 or 5 minutes. Becky Lynch becomes a unified champion for the women's division in the main event of WrestleMania. Kofi Kingston defeats Daniel Bryan to win the World Heavyweight title, the WWE World Championship. It's a babyface bonanza, this Mania. The only minor disappointment seems to have been in the Kurt Angle feud with Baron Corbin, when it turned out, no, he's not actually facing John Cena. John Cena's going to face Elias because music, I guess. Yeah, it sounds to me like it was a great Mania. I'm really regretting not having been able to watch it live, and I will try and get around to watching it at some stage. The reason why I wanted to talk about it, though, is because this Mania has been interesting for me. The lead up and the results, because it seems to me like WWE are trying to win over people on a regular basis now. Whereas before they were trying to almost turn people away on a weekly basis so that people would tune in for the pay-per-views, because that's where they could draw people in with the network and pay-per-view, for what limited value that has now. It seems to me that they're trying to draw people back into the week by week by having lovable characters that people are going to want to tune in to see every single week. Why? Well, they've got a big billion-dollar deal with fucking Fox to air SmackDown and I believe Raw. I can't remember if Raw is actually staying or moving, but I know SmackDown for sure is moving in a multi-billion-dollar deal. So I think it's a very purposeful choice that WWE have finally decided to stop the heel bullshit all the time. Now, this will have its own unintended consequences in time. I think people will slowly start to realize that sometimes the heat is necessary. Wrestling fans these days have kind of gotten tired of the concept of heat. What is heat? Establishing what the fans want and then doing everything you can to take it away from them. That's heat. The trouble with heat, though, is over time it loses its luster and you get what is fondly known in the business as fuck you heat, which is, fuck it, you're not going to give it to me anyway, so why the fuck should I watch? Now, though, we're turning a little bit with this WrestleMania, which is that they've been given virtually everything they wanted. Brock Lesnar is out as Universal Champion, which virtually opens the door for him to go and compete in UFC now. Roman Reigns came back and won. Kofi Kingston, for some reason, I can't even remember what it was. I think it was at least 3 or 4 months ago, he started picking up some real steam. But at some point in the year, fans just got it in their heads they wanted to see him as champion. And I'm still not, and I'm going to be the dick in this situation. I still don't really understand why. I get he's been in the business a long time and he's picked up a few championships and things like that. But there's millions of wrestlers that fit that description. I'm happy, though, that WWE seemed to have gotten over the whole... well, as I explained to my friend, The Rock and Farouk are the only two WWE... I'm not even sure if Farouk counts. No, I don't know if he does. I know The Rock is. Probably their only ever African-American World Heavyweight Champion. You might make the argument of Bobby Lashley because he held the ECW strap, but come on now. Yeah, no. And in fact, there's even, oh gosh, I'm forgetting somebody as well. The last ever ECW champion was African-American as well. But again, I just, because of how poorly that strap was treated, I wouldn't put them in the same pantheon as The Rock with the WWE Championship. But it's nice, though, that This Mania, if nothing else, has shown that they are prepared to get behind a performer because of their drawing power, not because of their own perception of what they want a star to be. Kofi Kingston is not the WWE's template. Becky Lynch, as beautiful as she is and as great a talker as she is and as hard as she's worked, isn't the template. Ronda was. That's why they threw all the money behind her. Charlotte Flair is. That's why they've given her such big pushes, and that's why she's broken all the records for women's championships up until this point. It's nice, though. And I would implore people, because wrestling fans are the worst, as evidenced by the Hall of Fame, some goddamn fan tackling Bret Hart and thinking it's a good idea. Why, I don't know. But wrestling fans can't have nice things. Mainly because they ruin them. At this point, they're in a unique position, because they're now going to get what they want on a regular basis, because they've got a TV show to film. He is going to be tricky to generate on a long-term basis for WWE, and I think they're going to find that out the hard way as they write themselves into corners as the television show progresses. But for now, at least, fans need to appreciate and like the fact that they're going to get what they want for a period. Their voices are going to be heard because, unfortunately, while the networks are going to guarantee the money, they're not going to guarantee a renewal if the figures if they peter off. If WWE continues to hemorrhage viewership, like people like me, with the bullshit they pulled in Saudi Arabia, then it's only a matter of time before they'll start to see the hindrance on the bottom line, even though they are doing better business than they ever have. So, while WrestleMania has turned out great, I don't think anyone would argue that it was a really good WrestleMania, and it was a very entertaining event with plenty of marquee matches that are going to stand out, and in years' time we're going to be thinking about and talking about, which is great. Excellent. At the same time, it might be the end of an era in some respects. Because while heel heat and depriving people of what they wanted for a long time sucks as an audience, because of course you're not getting what you want, it did give us Daniel Bryan. And it gave us CM Punk. And it gave us other superstars that were not... It's difficult to see if... and it depends if they do fully embrace a return to a non-PG era. It'll be interesting to see if they do that. I don't know if they will, but I hope that they do. So, let's have a very quick look. We've been going for 27 minutes now, so I've got a little bit more time left. That's right, yeah, so WrestleMania, for those of you who wanted to tune in, I apologise that I couldn't cover it live. Again, life, man. Life's weird. Life, I was kind of hoping on a favour or two from some people. Unfortunately, that didn't come to pass. So, unfortunately, I got bills to pay, and shoveling out £10 for the fucking WWE Network when I've already effectively boycotted them didn't seem, number one, the moral thing to do, but secondly, fuck it, I got bills to pay, bitch. So, yeah, I'm gonna put that £10 to something else and just check it out all out on YouTube pirated in a couple of days. Now that we've got WrestleMania out of the way, now that we've got the gaming out of the way, I do want to talk about the UFC situation. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I tweeted about this recently. It's the fact that we're coming into a situation now where fighters are attempting to provoke each other and get fights based solely on... not even anything really tangible beyond just assault. That's probably the nicest way I can say it. And the reason I touched on this is because I think it speaks to a wider issue that you're seeing more and more of these days. Twitter is outrage culture on a website. It's got a blue logo and everything. It just, instead of Twitter, you cross that out and you put outrage. It's almost impossible to have a dialogue now, because unless you can make your point quickly and succinctly, no one's going to listen to you. No one's going to give you the time of day to give you 5 minutes to make a point. And that breeds bad behavior. Before I get on to make the main point, I'll give you an example. Recently, Luke Thomas, who's a prominent MMA commentator, pundit, analyst, whatever you want to call him, he has two shows on. He does the MMA Hour, and he has a show on Sirius XM. Or XF, FM, I don't know. It's a radio show in America. And he was interviewed by Brendan Sharp, who is an ex-UFC fighter and is now a comedian. Again, I don't know if you'd want to call him an analyst. He's a pundit. I would argue he's a pundit. I would love, considering that Sharp is supposed to be interviewing Luke Thomas, for him to let him fucking answer a question without interrupting him. But the thing with that is, though, that he's used to being able to talk on his own. Because he discovered, like I have, like a bunch of other people have, that the only way to really get your point across these days, unabated, is to do one of these things. You can't really do it on social media because there's going to be someone that perks up and takes you out of context or focuses on something else or won't listen to your points or won't cede argument, which I have a problem with as well, by the way. Again, my discussion with my good, close personal friend, I conflated defunct and friend there for seeing. I don't really know. Cyril from Defunct Games. We have conversations all the time where we go back and forth, and it gets quite heated. I'll level with you guys. It's not easy having a conversation with me because I don't explain things all that well, despite the fact that I'm supposedly intelligent. I assure you all I am not. It's just a couple of pound coins rattling around in this tin can up here. But nevertheless, it's tricky sometimes to make the point succinctly for me, which is why I usually use the multiple thing on Twitter, so you tweet and you add bits on the underside. Or this. This is a great way because you can just talk. You don't have to be interrupted if you don't want to. If I want to come on here and have an argument or a point that I've thought about all day, great. If I just want to rattle off like I'm doing today, full disclosure, I had a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, but that's about it. We just see how it goes from here. Then you can. And you don't have to worry about being interrupted. Luke Thomas, who has boundless knowledge on the business and covers it in a more deep, factual way than Brendan Schaub, I feel needs to be listened to. Schaub is so desperate to either impress him or seem in the same breadth of conversation as him, but he won't let him answer a fucking question. There's times where, and again, I've seen this with other people, and he's sure as hell not the only person guilty of this. Let me ask you a question, because what I think, to the point where I don't really have anything to add. I can't add anything, because you've already either said everything that's need to be said, or you've now taken the conversation to a different arena that doesn't apply to that question anymore. So what are we doing? If you're going to ask, and again, I give Cyril credit for this, credit for this. In our podcast, for instance, he'll ask questions, and he'll give me the grace to let me answer a question. In our conversations, it's a little different. He will jump in with things. And I do have to sometimes kind of go, let me finish. But that's because there's an excitement value there. And that we're not trying to impress anybody because we're just having a conversation with each other. And I like that. I like the fact that we have very, very, very vivid and heated conversations at times because it tests me. It forces me to really think about what I'm trying to say rather than just saying something in the vain hope that he might not understand the point I've tried to make and will just go, yeah, of course I agree with you. Because that never happens. He's fully prepared to question me on everything, and I like that. The difference, though, is I think he's willing to secede points. Take that to Twitter, specifically with fight promotion and the UFC. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up. Conor and Khabib recently got into it on Twitter. And they're crossing lines that you really shouldn't be crossing, considering one very key important factor in this. They're not trying to sell a fight. That neither of them are fighting right now. They're both suspended. So what are we doing here? And this was summed up beautifully. This is the point. The Conor, that's just the fuel for this bit. I saw a tweet by someone, and it said something to the effect of, "So who do you think won, Conor or Khabib in this exchange?" And it's, fuck's sake, no one won. This is dumb. This is stupid. We're all losers in this situation because if anyone feeds into it, then you're buying into one side or the other, and they're both in the wrong here. One's calling the other a rapist, the other one's being racist to the other person, or is at least Islamophobic, at least if you want to defend it to that point and say it's not racist. Okay, fine, it's Islamophobic. It's okay, fine, it maybe not racist, that's probably the wrong term, but it's certainly Islamophobic. So who's the winner in those two situations? There isn't a winner in those two situations. They're just both as bad as each other. But yet, because of the way that social media and Twitter works in particular, people got behind it. It's something to talk about. We're all losers in this situation, though. No one was able to make a succinct point, and no one was able to really sit back for 5 minutes and go, do you know what? Maybe you two shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is a silly conversation to have. Maybe we all should be doing more important things with our lives. And so, while I have an appreciation for the UFC in terms of their skills. Certainly, especially recently with Bare Knuckle Fighting 5, which had Artem Lobov batter the shit out of some poor nameless person that I can't even remember, who gave him a good hiding for good measure, by the way. That was horrible. That was awful. I would not advocate anyone go and check that out at all, because it's just two men flailing it. It's literally the lowest common denominator as far as MMA is concerned, because they were literally just smacking each other at some stages, and it was awkward and flaily and just really not that pleasant to watch. But as far as the fact that fighters are now utilizing these kinds of tactics, they're going to go and attack each other, both physically and verbally, when sometimes, I understand sometimes there is personal rivalries between two people. Daniel Cormier and John Jones springs immediately to mind, where John Jones literally said to Daniel Cormier, I would kill you. You know I could kill you, right? You know I'd kill you, right? Who at that point didn't say that's not across the line? Who didn't go to him at that point and say, you can't fucking say that, you idiot. Do you know what that is? That's against the law. You can't threaten to kill somebody. What, and the justification is, well, we're trying to sell a fight here. Get the fuck out of here. And again, I use WWE as poor an example as they can be sometimes. But they don't threaten to kill anybody. Because psychology dictates that if you do kill somebody, that's it. It's over. It's done. And you're not supposed to ever tease the concept that it's done. You should reach a chapter end or a book end of a rivalry, but you never close the book. So the point of this end part of this podcast was very simple. And it's again the usual ploy that I attempt to ask people to consider before they go and post anything. And it links back to some tweets that I did recently as well, which is, as hard as it is to understand the subject matter of what you're debating and arguing sometimes, or as hard as it is to try and make your mark on the world, as I'm trying to right now with my channel and with a few other things, it's not easy to stand out in a crowd. Sometimes, though, it pays to just look at the landscape. It pays to do the quiet thing. It pays to do the low-key thing. It pays to play the long game. Because at least then you know that you've got consistency. At least then it's something that you know you can maintain. It's something you can improve. If you go out on a limb, there's rewards with that. I understand that. But then, if you don't stop to think for more than 5 minutes, you're at risk of getting caught up with the torrent of other bullshit that seems to be going on with social media these days. Again, it's evidenced in sport because of the way that a lot of different sports are evolving to be more centric to the characters involved rather than the sport itself. What I mean by that is that the stories about the people in sport are bigger than the fights and bigger than the games and bigger than anything else that the sport has to offer apart from the characters and the soap opera of it all. And that's not what sport is meant to be. And we're in danger of losing the thread on all this because of this outrage culture that we're seeing more and more of. So, to sum up, the lovely people of YouTube, which is in no way part of outrage culture, or, the need to get to a point first, hence why I'm doing a WrestleMania recap the day after, and not really all that soon. And I'm talking about Conor Khabib a week after the fact, and there's probably some other stuff in there that I'm missing as well. Just take some time. And make sure before you let loose to the world. It will be for your benefit more than anybody else's, but it might benefit everyone else too. And I genuinely believe that with my project, The Halcyon Show, in trying to take time with things, to come to the right conclusion, not the quickest one. And I don't always do it, but I like to think that I would try and at least stay on the balance of being on the right page of history with most things, rather than just trying to get out there as quickly as possible or as loudly as possible. You can disagree with that, and I would welcome any debates or any counter arguments to that in the comment section below if you want to go back and forth on it. So, this has been a long one. I don't know about you, but I'm pooped. Voice is just a little bit tired, and I haven't had a sip of my coffee in a little while. It's probably gone cold. At least Red Dead's waiting for me now. Quick channel update for what it's worth. 7 shows recorded today, with another 4 or 5 already pre-recorded. Editing them is going to be a stretch. It's going to take some time. You've got shows still ending at the back end of May. So those are when the Blink shows are all finished. Hopefully by that point, I'll have enough episodes to keep the thing going until maybe the back end of July. At that point though, We'll have to see. It's becoming harder and harder to find time during the week to sit down and film. It's becoming harder and harder during the week to sit down and edit. So you'll have to forgive me if the shows then go back to a 2-weekly thing or even a monthly thing, because at this stage it's very, very tricky for me to keep up with the kind of content that I want to produce versus the amount of content that I can put out. The Avengers stuff wasn't easy to do on time. It got done. The podcasts, they'll be coming every week anyway. I'm going to try and sit down and make sure I give you at least one podcast a week, even though I'm not supposed to be calling them podcasts anymore. It's just a show. But at the same time, I will continue to try and produce you content, keep up with the current events, let you know what's going on with me, and hopefully hear about what's going on with you guys. So please leave me your thoughts in the comments description below. Check out some of the content that I've produced recently. I've been trying my best to make it good, make it varied, make it interesting. Also go and check me out on Defunct Gaming's channel. I've obviously referenced him in this conversation a couple of times. I've done a couple of quizzes with him recently. I've also done a podcast on my channel and with him. Might be popping up there again soon. I'm not too sure. I've got some quizzes for him lined up, so hopefully we'll get those recorded at some stage. Also going to try and line up a couple of other podcasts with a few other people and start getting the ball rolling on having a weekly show where I can have a guest on and we can talk back and forth, because I think it'd be more interesting than just me talking, even though I love talking. Can you tell? I haven't stopped for the last half an hour. But yeah, I think that wraps everything up. So thank you very much again for listening to this edition of the Halcyon Show. Please like, share, and subscribe, as I've just mentioned. Please check out some of the other content that I've been producing recently, including over on Defunct Games channel. Follow me on Twitter. And as always, please take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of the Halcyon Show.